The term designer babies means to me, it's kind of like you're creating a we, me kind of person, and you get to pick their eye color and their hair color. And that's really strange because that's God's job. He's supposed to do all that.
If it's just on the basis of I want my kid to have blue eyes or blonde hair or something like that, I just don't think that's necessarily what should happen.
If you're designing it to not have Down syndrome or autism, disease like that, that's a good thing. But if you're just changing the baby for the sex or the eye color or the hair color, then yeah, you are playing God.
I would not necessarily say that we're playing God when we enter the realm of designing babies, but I don't think that God necessarily agrees with it. I think that He created us all to be born the way we are, and we're all equal in a way.
I think it would be difficult to decide if I would design my baby if I had the opportunity. Wrong to create a baby that someone might love more because you can control like the way they'll look, and if that's controlling how much you'll love them, then that's an issue.
I think if you were to take it out of a religious context, there's still a lot of ethical issues with designing babies. One being that maybe if this were to become a popular thing, that babies in the future who weren't designed, there's stigma against them, and there kind of becomes a disparity in society with babies who were designed and are maybe considered superior to babies who aren't.
Someone might choose to have all sons, or someone might choose to have all daughters, and that could affect the population of too many girls or too many guys.
The whole idea of it just seems kind of scary, first of all, and it seems so new and different, like, I don't know. So no, I would not want to have a designer baby.
I myself also feel very uncomfortable with the idea, but I acknowledge the fact that, life evolves and, norms change, and maybe this is the way that we're supposed to go.
Yeah, I do believe that we're playing God when we try to design babies. I believe that we're never gonna surpass our Creator, and we can never be like Him, but we would always have something of Him.
I want my potato head to have blue eyes like my mom.
I want my potato head to have brown eyes like me.
You know, it's really cool how we can design our own potato heads just the way we like.
Yeah, it brings back fun memories of all the different ways I would build my potato head.
There are many toys throughout the years that you could make or design just how you like them. Do you remember Build-A-Bear?
Oh yeah, and American Girl dolls?
The potato head is a classic, though.
True. And it's really cool to design your toys, but did you know that we have the technology to design people?
You can pick their eye color, hair color. You can actually mix and match the DNA you want for your child.
Whoa, we might be crossing some boundaries there, like we're playing God. I mean, it's amazing that we have the technology to do this.
But just because we have the ability to do something doesn't mean that we should do it.
What do you think? Would you design your own child if you had the chance?
Do you see anything wrong with this, ethically or morally?
Bioethics and Designer Babies, creating new moral and ethical dilemmas. That's what we'll be talking about today. Hi everyone, I'm Corey.
And I'm Christian, and this is Realfaith TV. We'd like to thank the students of Notre Dame High School in Lawrenceville, New Jersey for helping us open the show today.
And for sharing some of their thoughts on the ethics behind designer babies.
We'll talk with them more throughout the show as part of our wild card segments.
But first, let's meet our spotlight guest, Mia, who will shed some light on the designer baby phenomenon and whether she thinks it presents a moral dilemma.
The term designer baby to me means altering your child in any way, whether that be hair color, eye color, or getting rid of a disease. It means altering your original form. It can be good and it can be bad. I think it can be good if we use it for positive and getting rid of diseases, but I think it can be bad if we go too far and start changing too many things about our children, like hair color and eye color. I would only design my child if I felt there was an imminent risk for their life. I would never do it just to do it like with superficial aspects of their appearance. I think that the Catholic Church is against designer babies and genetic engineering of designer babies, only because we're altering what God made, and we're all made in God's image, and we shouldn't do that. I think that once people push the line with altering what their child looks like, that's too far, because we are made in God's image and we shouldn't want to change ourselves. But I do think that there is a gray area with helping people by taking out diseases and making their life better.
I think she brings up really good points in that you shouldn't really worry about the superficiality of your children, whether it's hair color, weight, height.
Well, let's see what our studio guests have to say about this topic.
Okay, they are Rebecca,
Mike,
Lexi,
Faith,
Joe,
and Michael. So, what is your opinion about people being able to create and design their own baby?
The first thought that comes to mind is it's really crazy and kind of scary, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those more bizarre technologies that's coming out in the 21st century, but it's probably going to become more commonplace as more people realize what this technology is all about.
Not only that, but it's interesting how they can use the technology to cure a disease and to prevent the baby from growing up and having that disease later on in life.
A lot of power in our hands. According to the website of the Embryo Project at Arizona State University, a designer baby is genetically engineered in a petri dish in a laboratory.
Some of the traits which can be selected can vary from lowering disease risk to gender selection.
Or other characteristics like hair and eye color and even athleticism.
Usually, multiple eggs are implanted at the same time, and many of the fertilized eggs are destroyed in the process.
Sometimes embryos are frozen until a couple decides to have a child.
The latest data from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services suggests that there are currently more than 600,000 cryopreserved or frozen embryos in the United States.
Tragically, many of them sit in freezers for years to eventually die or be thrown away.
As you can see, this selfish need to have control over the creation of other human beings at their most innocent stages of development presents a huge challenge to us as Catholics in the 21st century.
And the fixation on creating the ideal child distorts the plan God has for each and every one of us.
But where does this idea come from, and is there justification for it?
Let's meet our first wildcard guest, Garrett, a student at Notre Dame High School who shared his opinion on this question.
Sadly, I do think that life is easier for people of certain hair color, skin color, or eye color, because even though we're in the 21st century and we've come so far as a society, people still do pick at each other for little things like being black or being Asian or having pink hair or having blue hair.
Do you think Garrett is right that a person's looks gives them better treatment?
And does that justify designing a baby?
I don't necessarily think that someone's looks give them better treatment as much as it might be a different kind of treatment. I don't necessarily believe that that justifies genetically designing the looks of your child.
I don't think that because society is so shallow that you should go and change your child to make them more what society calls perfect, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I do believe that if someone is better looking, they're probably going to get better treatment, but that's just how the world works. You can't be so naive as to believe that one day no one will judge anyone else and no one will judge someone by what's inside instead of what's outside. I know that's a cynical outlook, but that's just how the world works. There will always be ignorance. There will always be people that judge other people based on their appearance. And so if you hope that you can design the perfect baby, I believe that you're wrong, simply because people will always have different opinions on what beauty is.
And to bounce off of what Joe was saying, there's always going to be that one guy who's like, oh, well, you're too thin, or you're too thick, you're fat, or there's always going to be that one person that judges everyone around them.
Yeah, and I think what we have to do is we have to accept others and we have to accept ourselves, how we are. I think that, doing the designer baby route, it's just too drastic of a measure for physical attributes.
Why not teach our children to embrace who they are and to not judge other people or treat other people differently just based on how they look? Change society, don't change yourself.
Yeah, that's a really good point. At the heart of the Catholic Church's teachings on bioethics is a firm belief that every embryo is a unique individual from the moment of conception and deserves our unconditional respect.
Every embryo is a human person, which means each one has a body and a soul.
For this reason, an embryo may never be considered simply a group of cells that can be created or destroyed in a laboratory.
Next, our spotlight guest, Mia, talks to us about some of the ethical conflicts concerning this idea of designer babies.
Let's hear her now.
Some of the ethical conflicts that can arise when we start designing our children are not everyone's going to have access to this. It's very expensive. So you're essentially propagating a race of very wealthy people that can do this. And that's going to create a divide between the poor and the wealthy. I think that part of the problem with the concept of designer babies is society's perception. We feel so much pressure to be perfect in a world that imposes perfection upon us. And I think that if we just accepted one another as we are, then maybe we wouldn't feel the need to change our children into something that we feel is better. I think by designing babies from the very first point, we're almost projecting our own insecurities onto them by telling them that we're not good enough, so they're not good enough. And I think work needs to be done in our mental capacities rather than our physical capacities to love ourselves and love the children that we're creating. There are a lot of risks to altering the genome in such a complex way. There's never going to be a simple answer. We don't even fully understand the genome. We only have about, I want to say like 70% of it mapped or something. So there's going to be a domino effect. If you fix one thing, does that alter a different thing? So you're almost playing God in a way that you don't know what's going to happen when you do go in there. So you don't know the side effects because there are so many possibilities. Even though I would probably consider altering my baby knowing they had a disease, I would not walk away scot-free without guilt. I think that there's something to be said when you change your child from the original form. It's who they were designed to be, and I think changing them is not always the best answer. I think that knowing that I changed something that already existed before I even knew about it would make me feel a little bit sick to my stomach. I don't think that we should love anyone more just because we had a hand in designing them. I think that we should love our children and our brothers and sisters all the same, whether they are afflicted with a disease or whether they have red hair or brown hair or green eyes. I think that love is a universal thing that should be spread equally throughout everyone.
So do you think we are playing God when we enter the realm of designing babies?
I mean, I feel like we've been playing God for like a long part of our history about like inventing medicines and inventing new technologies and stuff, but I think, yeah, I feel like this is the line where we shouldn't cross. I feel like this is playing God too much, you know?
Because, you know, like we were like you said about medicine, you know, that's not playing God so much as helping your fellow man, but I mean, when you get to decide all the little details about your child, that's like a whole nother level of control that we really shouldn't have access to.
God already has a plan for us before we were born, and we're basically changing his plans. I think it's not wrong.
Like, God knew us before we were even in the womb, so how could you go and change someone that God made everyone and everything? How can you go and try and change something that is made perfectly in his image?
To me, more or less, it's also playing God, but it's also a huge step in society. Where can society take this? What are they going to do with it? It's going to lead to too much change, and I think in doing that, we should just leave to God what God does and leave to us what we were meant to do. And I do not believe that this is something that we were meant to be able to do. It's just taking things too far.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a fine line between God and creation, and I think we should know there are some times when you just have to leave it alone. The practice of genetically engineering a child fosters discrimination of those whose genetic qualities do not meet with the arbitrary standard of perfection.
Or in other words, our decisions of what traits are seen as desired create yet another way that people see and limit what we see as beautiful. As Catholic Christians, we are called to seek beauty and God in everyone.
In February 2006, Pope Benedict XVI stated, "God's love does not differentiate between the newly conceived infant still in his or her mother's womb,
And the child or young person or the adult and the elderly person.
God does not distinguish between them because he sees an impression of his own image and likeness in each one."
Next, our wildcard guest, Emily, addresses her concerns about this brave new world of bioengineering children.
Let's meet her now.
Well, I see that there are a lot of ethical issues to this topic because we are interfering with something that's been in place in nature called natural selection, and that's weeding out those who are less fit than other organisms. And I also feel that we are also playing God. We as humans have our place in this world, and God has his place in our world. We are interfering with God, we are interfering with nature, and we are interfering with things that we should not be a part of in this world. And I feel like we should stop.
So why do you think someone would want to alter their child's hair color or eye color? And really, what does this say about society?
I think it just goes to show, like, how, as I said before, how shallow society is and how that it shouldn't be, like, with the new generation that is being born, it shouldn't, like, be passed on down to the new generation. I think we should try to pass on to the new generation how exterior doesn't matter, how much interior matters.
Yeah, we're so obsessed with this idea of everyone has to look perfect, everyone has to conform to what society thinks beauty looks like, and that's just not right.
In agreement with what Joe and Faith were saying, society today is just so critical towards how your outward appearance is, and everyone is just so judgmental, and it just changes so much, and it gets inside your head, and it just bothers you for a while, and then it leads to where we are now.
Yeah, I definitely think that changing the appearance or making children more and more perfect can make our society more and more shallow. If you go by what the media is pushing out these days, society does seem to favor the young, the healthy, the beautiful people.
But church teaching tells us otherwise. The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith's document titled Instruction Dignitas Personae states that
dignity belongs equally to every single human being, regardless of his or her parents' desires, his social condition, educational formation, or level of physical development.
it is forgotten that sick and disabled people are not some separate category of humanity.
In fact, sickness and disability are part of the human condition and affect every individual even when there is no direct experience of it.
It is a dangerous and slippery slope because as we try to create perfect people, we are also eliminating others and the diversity that we bring to the world.
It makes you wonder how different designing your own baby for certain physical traits is from what Hitler was doing in World War II.
His prejudice about what was or was not acceptable for people led to the murder of millions.
Who are we to think that we have the right to alter nature, the uniqueness, and the beauty that God creates?
Are we saying that we don't like the color eyes we have or would be created with?
Let's go back to our spotlight guest, Mia, where she'll talk about modern society's fixation on the ideal child.
And how we as Catholics need to keep ourselves informed on these ethical issues in order to confront the perils of our time.
I think that society has crafted this idea of the ideal person. What they're beautiful, they're funny, they're smart, they can do everything, they can do anything they want. And I think that that's why we have this need to change everything, especially our children, because we just want them to be better. We want them to be more like that ideal person. So I think that Designer Babies definitely comes from that point in society where how can we improve our children? But I don't think it ends there. I think we impose that ideal on our children even when they're growing up. How can we make them better? How can we make them smarter? Do we get them a tutor? Do we give them private school? It just keeps going. We just keep imposing that unfair ideal person on them. I think our role as Catholics is to get the message out there, get our standpoint out there, have people understand why we are against this and why they shouldn't do it. I think the average person can contribute to this culture by informing themselves. So much of our negativity or our positivity toward things comes from not understanding things. And if we can inform ourselves, then I think it'll be better. Jesus, his greatest commandment was to love one another and love everybody. So I think he'd say, don't do it. You're supposed to love everyone equally. You're gonna love the kid you get, so don't do it. I think in a way, we're playing God when we enter the realm of Designer Babies. Like I said earlier, we are all designed in his image. That said, there's a gray area. There's a really large gray area that I think people wouldn't object to if they knew it would increase that person's quality of life. But there also is a huge area of playing God when we decide to alter a child's appearance. That is wrong. I do believe that God has a plan for everyone. It might be a little bit convoluted to believe that, but I do. I think that everyone was designed for a reason and they have their own small part to play in the world.
What sort of ethical problems or consequences can arise in our society when we start designing our children?
I think we really start to lose the value of life once we like start designing our children. Like life doesn't seem so much as a miracle anymore. It just seems like something that's designed in labs.
Like life is a beautiful gift, and as you were saying before, like a beautiful gift usually isn't made in a laboratory. It is a child is a gift from heaven, not from some scientists.
And I think what's important too is say you want to go get a luxury car, you pick out the rims you want, you pick out the color leather, the interior, the paint, all of that, but it's a thing. As soon as you start doing that with a child, it's like all of a sudden they're not a human life, they're just another thing that you're designing.
It's almost like we've begun to dehumanize our children and turn life into something that we can design and we can create instead of something that God creates and then gives to us.
If it's not broken, don't fix it. Human life is perfect as it is. You don't need to change it. And there's a fine line between, like fixing broken legs and like fixing hearts and then just altering babies, like characteristics.
And even furthermore, who decides what's desirable? Who decides what's perfect, what's beautiful, you know what I mean? So, in the book of Psalms, chapter 139, David writes,
"For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb.
I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works."
And in Isaiah chapter 64, we read,
"Yet, Lord, you are our Father. We are the clay, and you our potter.
We are all the work of your hand."
God knew us before we were even born. It is God's love that wills us into being.
God created all the different eye colors, skin tones, every single part of our being. God made it all.
Why would anyone want to manipulate that and take on the job of creator?
As faithful Catholics, we are expected to respect God's plan rather than coming up with our own.
Finally, our last wildcard guest, Lakshmi, weighs in on whether she finds it ethical to design a baby.
And if it's something she would do if given the opportunity.
If I had the opportunity to design my own baby, I wouldn't do it because I don't think I could make the decisions. Because say something is wrong, like say my daughter or son is getting bullied because of something that I chose, I couldn't take it upon myself. Like I couldn't watch anything like wrong happen to them because of the decisions I've made. Also, I think everyone's made the way they are because God had a plan for us, and I don't think I could take the reins as God and decide.
I really understand what she's saying because I know for me, I have vision problems, and technically it's a disability. And I ended up actually doing my whole college essay on my disability, and looking into it like that, I kind of realized that I would be a totally different person if it weren't for my vision problems. So I really like who I am today, and I think that given the opportunity to fix my vision problems, I don't know that I would.
I think you're right. I think that some issues that people have to overcome can definitely help build their character. But I think also if it's a serious medical condition where they could die young or they wouldn't be able to live a full life, it's definitely good.
The Catholic Church believes that science and technology have a great potential for both good and evil.
So we need to really think and pray about what we choose to do and why we choose to do it.
Advances in these areas must always be grounded in moral responsibility to respect the dignity of human life from conception until natural death.
So how can we use our faith to change hearts and minds about bioengineering the most innocent among us?
We'd love to hear from you.
Contact us at realfaithtv.com.
Or share your thoughts with us on Twitter.
And we'll leave you today with this tweet from Pope Francis on May 13th, 2013.
It is God who gives life.
Let us respect and love human life.
Especially vulnerable life in a mother's womb.
Thanks for watching.
We'll see you next time on
Realfaith TV. God bless.